You think you're thinking, but you're being thought. Right now, as you listen to these words, there's a stream of mental activity you believe you're directing. But Carl Jung discovered something that shatters this comfortable illusion. Most of your thoughts aren't yours at all. They're autonomous complexes, inherited patterns, collective conditioning running ancient programs through your modern mind. And until you understand this, you'll remain a puppet dancing to strings you can't see. But once you grasp what Jung revealed about the relationship between consciousness and reality, you'll discover that your thoughts don't just describe reality, they actively create it. Not through mystical thinking or wish fulfillment, but through a psychological mechanism so profound that once you see it, you can never unsee it. The revelation came to Jung through decades of observing how inner psychological states manifest as outer experiences. Patient after patient demonstrated the same pattern, change the inner constellation of thoughts and complexes, and outer reality reorganizes itself in corresponding ways. Not because thoughts magically alter physical matter, but because thoughts determine what you perceive, how you act, who you attract, and what possibilities you can even recognize. Your thoughts are the lens through which reality takes shape, and most people never realize they can change the lens. Listen to what's happening in your mind right now. That voice commenting on these words, is it really you? Or is it a complex speaking, perhaps the skeptical intellectual, the hopeful seeker, or the dismissive cynic? Jung discovered that what we call thinking is often various autonomous parts of our psyche, taking turns at the microphone. Each complex has its own agenda, its own voice, its own way of constructing reality. And whichever complex is dominant at any moment literally determines what reality you're capable of experiencing. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. This isn't metaphorical. Jung observed that unconscious thoughts and complexes create patterns so consistent they appear to be external fate. The person with an abandonment complex repeatedly creates situations where they're abandoned. The one with an authority complex constantly manifests conflicts with power. The individual with an inferiority complex structures reality to confirm their inadequacy. The thoughts create the reality, then the reality reinforces the thoughts, creating loops that can span lifetimes. But here's where Jung's discovery becomes revolutionary. Once you understand that thoughts are creating reality rather than just commenting on it, you gain the power to intervene. Not through positive thinking or affirmations. Jung would have seen those as superficial, but through what he called conscious dialogue with the psyche. By making unconscious thought patterns conscious, by understanding which complexes are running, which programs, you can begin to choose which lens you look through. The mechanism works like this. Your unconscious mind contains what Jung called complexes, clusters of thoughts, emotions, and memories organized around specific themes. When a complex is activated, it doesn't just influence your thinking, it literally hijacks your perception. A mother complex doesn't just make you think about nurturing, it causes you to perceive the world in terms of nurturing or its absence. You see mothers everywhere. Good mothers, bad mothers, mother figures, mother wounds. Reality itself seems to organize around this theme. This isn't delusion, it's selective perception so powerful it might as well be reality creation. When a complex is active, you notice what confirms it and ignore what doesn't. You unconsciously make choices that reinforce it. You attract people who play complementary roles. You create, through thousands of micro decisions, exactly the reality that the complex expects to find. Then you point to that reality as proof that the complex's view is accurate. Jung discovered this through his concept of synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that seem to defy causal explanation. A patient dreams of a golden scarab, and during the session, a scarab beetle flies in the window. Someone thinks intensely about an old friend, and the friend calls. You're struggling with a decision, and the exact book you need falls off the shelf. These aren't random. They're the visible manifestation of invisible psychological states affecting reality. But synchronicity isn't magic. It's the psyche's ability to constellate outer experiences that match inner states. When you change your inner constellation, different synchronicities occur. Different opportunities appear. Different people enter your life. Different possibilities become visible. It's not that reality changes. It's that different realities were always available, and your thoughts determine which one you can access. The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. Jung understood that we don't just have thoughts. We are living in a field of collective consciousness where thoughts have a kind of autonomous existence. Your thoughts interact with others' thoughts in ways that create shared realities. A marriage isn't two people sharing a life. It's two psyches creating a third reality through their combined thought patterns. This explains why certain relationships feel fated. The psyches involved are creating a shared reality so specific that it seems predetermined. It explains why group dynamics can feel overwhelming. Multiple psyches are contributing to a collective thought field. It explains why some environments feel oppressive or uplifting, regardless of their physical characteristics. The collective thoughts in that space create a psychological atmosphere as real as weather. The shadow plays a crucial role in this reality creation. What you refuse to acknowledge in yourself gets projected onto external reality. If you deny your own aggression, you'll live in a reality full of aggressive people. If you reject your own neediness, you'll be surrounded by needy individuals. If you disown your power, you'll constantly encounter domineering figures. The outer world becomes a screen for your inner projections, and you mistake the movie for reality. Jung's method for working with this wasn't to eliminate projections. That's impossible. Instead, he advocated becoming conscious of them. When you recognize that the difficult person in your life is carrying your projection, you can withdraw it. When you see that your reality is reflecting your shadow, you can integrate it. As you reclaim projections, your reality transforms. Not because the world changes, but because you're no longer forcing it to play out your unconscious dynamics. Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes. This awakening isn't spiritual bypassing. It's recognizing that the boundary between inner and outer is far more permeable than we imagine. Your thoughts don't just influence your reality, they are the primary creative force shaping it. But most people's thoughts are so unconscious, so automatic, so driven by complexes that they're creating by default rather than by choice. Active imagination was Jung's primary tool for working with this creative power. Instead of trying to control thoughts through will, he entered into dialogue with them. He would visualize inner figures and interact with them, discovering that they had wisdom, autonomy, and the ability to transform both inner and outer reality. By consciously engaging with the forces that usually operate unconsciously, he could influence how they manifested in the world. This practice revealed something profound. Thoughts aren't just mental events. They're living entities in the psyche. They have their own agendas, their own energy, their own ability to affect reality. When you relate to them consciously rather than being unconsciously driven by them, you become co-creator rather than victim. You're not controlling reality in the sense of dominating it, but in the sense of consciously participating in its creation. The collective unconscious adds another layer. Your thoughts aren't just personal. They're connected to the thoughts of all humanity. Archetypal patterns flow through your individual psyche, carrying the power of millions of human experiences. When you align with an archetype consciously, you tap into immense creative power. The entrepreneur aligned with the creator archetype doesn't just have good ideas. They channel the creative force that's built civilizations. But unconscious identification with archetypes can be destructive. The person possessed by the warrior archetype creates conflict everywhere. The one identified with the martyr creates situations requiring sacrifice. The individual caught by the trickster generates chaos. These aren't conscious choices. They're archetypal patterns using human lives as their stage. Only consciousness can break the spell. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. This principle reveals how powerfully thoughts create reality. What irritates you in others is usually your own unconscious material projected outward. But here's the deeper truth. By projecting it, you're literally creating more of it in your reality. Your irritation at others' arrogance increases the arrogance you encounter. Your judgment of others' weakness multiplies the weakness around you. You're not just observing reality, you're generating it through your projections. The process of withdrawing projections doesn't just change your inner state, it transforms your outer experience. As you own your shadow material, you stop creating situations that reflect it. As you integrate your projections, the people and circumstances that carried them either transform or fade from your life. Reality reorganizes itself around your new level of consciousness. Dreams demonstrate this creative power nightly. In dreams, thoughts instantly become reality. You think of a person, and they appear. You fear something, and it manifests. You desire something, and it's there. Jung saw dreams not as meaningless fantasies, but as pure demonstrations of how consciousness creates reality when freed from the constraints of physical law. The principles operating in dreams operate in waking life too, just more slowly and subtly. The creation of something new is not accomplished by the intellect, but by the play instinct acting from inner necessity. This play instinct is key to conscious reality creation. When you relate to your thoughts playfully rather than seriously, when you engage with inner figures creatively rather than fearfully, when you experiment with different perspectives rather than defending fixed positions, you activate the psyche's natural creative power. Children demonstrate this naturally. They think of a game, and reality becomes that game. A stick becomes a sword, a box becomes a castle, playmates become characters. They're not pretending, they're actively creating reality through imagination. Adults lose this ability not because it stops working, but because they stop believing it's real. Jung's work was partly about recovering this creative relationship with consciousness. The individuation process, becoming who you truly are, is ultimately about conscious reality creation. As you differentiate from collective patterns, integrate your shadow, and develop relationship with the self, you stop living in reality created by unconscious forces and start living in reality created by conscious choice. You don't transcend physical law, but you discover how much of what you took for fixed law was actually unconscious creation. I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become. This isn't motivational speaking, it's recognition of the psyche's creative power. What happened to you created certain thought patterns. Those patterns created certain realities. But consciousness can intervene. You can examine the patterns, dialogue with them, transform them. As they transform, the reality they create transforms. You literally become what you choose by choosing which thoughts to cultivate and which to transform. The practical application requires what Jung called holding the tension. When you want to change your reality, the ego wants to force new thoughts. But forced positive thinking creates shadow. Whatever you're trying not to think gains power in the unconscious. Instead, Jung advocated holding both the current reality and the desired reality in consciousness simultaneously. From this tension, the transcendent function emerges, a third option that includes both, but transcends both. For example, if you're experiencing poverty consciousness, don't try to force abundance thinking. Instead, hold both the reality of lack and the possibility of abundance. Dialogue with both. Understand what each is protecting or providing. From this conscious tension, a new relationship to resources emerges. Neither the desperation of poverty consciousness nor the denial of positive thinking, but something more integrated and therefore more powerful. Synchronicities multiply when you work this way. As you hold conscious tension between what is and what could be, meaningful coincidences guide the transformation. The right teacher appears, the needed resource manifests, the perfect opportunity arises. Not because you're forcing reality through will, but because you're aligning inner and outer through consciousness. Your perception will become clear only when you can look into your own soul. Looking into your soul means seeing which thoughts are creating which realities. It means recognizing the factory where your experience is being manufactured. Most people spend their lives trying to change the products without ever examining the production process. Jung's insight was that consciousness of the process is what allows genuine transformation. This isn't about becoming all-powerful or manifesting whatever the ego wants. It's about recognizing that you're already creating reality unconsciously and choosing to do so more consciously. It's about understanding that your thoughts aren't just describing reality. They're instructions for what reality to become. It's about taking responsibility, not just for your actions, but for the consciousness that generates both thoughts and actions. The shadow side of this knowledge is inflation, the ego believing it can control everything through thought. Jung warned against this repeatedly. The ego doesn't control reality. Consciousness participates in reality's creation. This participation requires humility, relationship with forces greater than ego, and acceptance of what can't be changed. Conscious reality creation isn't about omnipotence, but about responsibility, the ability to respond creatively rather than react mechanically. Show me a sane man, and I will cure him for you. What we call sanity often means successfully adapted to collective thought forms that create limited reality. The sane person accepts that reality is fixed, that thoughts just describe what is, that inner and outer are completely separate. Jung's cure is awakening to the creative power of consciousness, recognizing that thoughts and reality are in constant dialogue, mutually creating each other. This awakening brings responsibility that many prefer to avoid. If you're participating in creating your reality, you can't blame fate, others, or circumstances entirely. You must examine how your consciousness is contributing to what manifests. This isn't victim blaming. External forces and others' choices matter. But it's recognizing that your thoughts are also forces shaping what becomes possible in your life. The ultimate realization Jung points toward is that consciousness and reality aren't separate things interacting. They're aspects of a unified field. Your thoughts don't control reality because thoughts and reality were never separate to begin with. They're more like the inside and outside of a Klein bottle, apparently distinct but actually continuous. Change one and the other responds because they're the same phenomenon viewed from different angles. Living from this recognition transforms everything. You stop trying to force reality through will and start dancing with it through consciousness. You stop seeing thoughts as mere commentary and recognize them as creative acts. You stop feeling like reality's victim and start experiencing yourself as its co-author. Not the only author, Jung was clear about the limits of ego, but a conscious participant in the ongoing creation. Your thoughts are creating your reality right now. The question isn't whether this is happening, but whether it's happening consciously or unconsciously. Every thought is a vote for what reality becomes. Every sustained pattern of thinking is a blueprint reality follows. Every complex that dominates your psyche is an architect designing your experience. Jung's gift wasn't a technique for controlling reality, but consciousness of how reality is already being created. With this consciousness comes choice, not unlimited choice. You're still subject to physical law, others' free will, and collective forces, but far more choice than you imagined when you believed thoughts were just internal commentary on fixed external facts. The thoughts shaping your reality right now, are they yours or are they inherited patterns? Are they conscious choices or unconscious programs? Are they creating the reality you want to inhabit or perpetuating one you want to transform? These questions matter because their answers determine not just what you think, but what you live. Jung showed us that the boundary between psyche and world is far more permeable than we imagine. Thoughts don't just influence reality, they participate in its very structure. Consciousness doesn't just observe, it creates through observation. You're not just in reality, you're of it, creating it while it creates you in an endless dance of mutual becoming. The power to use thoughts to shape reality isn't something you need to develop. It's something you're already doing. Jung's work simply makes conscious what was unconscious, chosen what was automatic, creative what was reactive. The reality you inhabit tomorrow is being created by the thoughts you're thinking today. The only question is whether you'll participate consciously in this creation or remain its unconscious puppet. Choose consciousness. Choose to see how thoughts become things. Choose to dialogue with the forces shaping your reality, rather than being shaped by them unknowingly. Choose to take your place as conscious co-creator rather than unconscious victim. Your thoughts are already controlling reality. Jung simply showed us how to hold the controls consciously. The reality you desire isn't somewhere else waiting to be discovered. It's here, waiting to be created through conscious participation. Your thoughts are the tools. Consciousness is the method. Integration is the path. And the life you actually want to live is the result of using thoughts not to dominate reality, but to dance with it as a conscious partner in creation.